Thanks, Tony. The Senate could be on the verge of passing a landmark immigration overhaul bill. And one supporter of reforming the nation's immigration laws made history earlier this week, delivering a speech on the Senate floor entirely in Spanish. Here to talk about immigration and other news of the day is Virginia Senator Tim Kaine. Good morning.
Morning, Allison.
We hope that song made you feel welcome.
It did. You guys have good memories about my music preferences.
Well,
thanks.
You're a very important person, so thanks for being here. Let's talk about first this immigration bill and really how impressive to do the entire speech. We know you spent time in Honduras.
I did. I was a missionary there 30 years ago.
Yes.
And when I knew we would get this bill to the floor, I just decided we'll have weeks of debate. Why not explain it for 15 minutes in Spanish, which is a language that's been spoken in this country continuously since 1565 when St. Augustine, Florida was scheduled. Settled, and it's spoken by 40 million Americans in their homes as their primary language. So I decided I would explain it in Spanish. I didn't realize it was the first time that anybody had done a speech in another language on the Senate floor, and got some interesting reaction from people, both pro and con afterwards, but I was glad to do it.
I'm sure, but one comment I read was from someone who indeed speaks Spanish as their first language, and they said that, you know, they'd waited decades to hear something like that. So, but I know that you probably did hear both sides too, and it was earlier this month. I stand corrected on that. Let's talk about the bulk of this, though. How far does this immigration bill go? Does it satisfy what you think we need?
It does, Allison. It's very comprehensive. We haven't done comprehensive reform since President Reagan's second term, and this bill is even broader in some ways. So here are pieces of it. Visa reforms for both high and low-skilled workers to make sure we've got the talent that we need. A path to citizenship for those who are here without documents. Very significant border security provisions, helping employers verify the immigration status of their employees, family reunification. It's a very broad bill. We will likely cast our final vote, likely today. It could slip over into tomorrow in the Senate. I think we're going to put a good margin of support behind it to show that this is not a Democratic bill. It's bipartisan, and more importantly, it's American. And we want to send that strong message to the House, because they will take next.
So what happens next?
Next. I mean, they're wrestling with their own bill, but I think the message we send by the margin that we put behind this bill will have a significant impact on their deliberations, and it is time that we do this reform. It's interesting. We've got, you know, business, labor, agriculture, technology, new American groups like La Raza. Everybody's been around the table. Strong support across the board. I'm hearing from businesses and hearing from farmers and hearing from others. It's time to make this reform, and I'm excited to be part of the Senate as we're about to do it.
Let's talk about some of the headlines coming out of the Supreme Court. It's been a busy week. It's been a busy week. Yesterday, we saw several big rulings on
same-sex marriage.
Same-sex marriage. I want to get your opinion on, and you know, bulk it all if you want, because you know how quickly our time goes. The Defense of Marriage Act being basically overturned, and then also Prop 8 being sent back, and in essence then punted back, and then going back to the appeal.
It was a huge day. I mean, I think it's going to go down as one of the most memorable days in the history of the court. Like other days when the court has said, you know what, that language in the Constitution, equality, it means equality. We put equality into the Constitution in the 14th Amendment in the 1860s, but it was 90 years before the Supreme Court said it really means what it says with respect to segregating races in schools. It was 110 years before the Supreme Court said it means what it says in terms of not allowing gender discrimination in statutes. And here, 140 years after the language goes into the Constitution, they say it means what it says with respect to sexual orientation. And I think it's a very powerful ruling as we're getting ready to come up on 4th of July next week, when it's common across the country for people to have commemorations and read the Declaration of Independence. Those words, all men are created equal, people will hear them, and they have kind of a little bit brighter luster and a deeper significance as a result of the decisions yesterday.
It's interesting because at the same time, there are groups with switching gears now to the Voting Rights Act, and the actions that we saw there, that we've come so far that perhaps we don't need these provisions. So some groups are saying, wait a minute, we still do need that. Virginia is affected. Some of the segments are Virginia affected by this ruling. Can you tell me your thoughts on it when that came down?
Sort of two thoughts. First, the Voting Rights Act isn't dead. I mean, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act still allows lawsuits to be brought against state or local or federal governments if they do things that block people's voting rights. So some big cases last year in Pennsylvania and others, those were not states that had a preclearance requirement. but nevertheless, voting provisions were blocked because they invaded minority voting rights. So the Voting Rights Act is still alive. The pre-clearance, the court said pre-clearance is okay, but they just didn't feel like Congress could continue to rely on the map from 1965. They had to go back and analyze whether there was a justification for certain states having a pre-clear and others not. So I have a suggestion. We're gonna put a bill on the table in Congress to try to carry forward with pre-clearance in a new way. But while we're working on that, I would say any jurisdiction, like in Virginia, cities and counties are used to filing pre-clearance reports. I had to do them when I was mayor or when I was governor. We had to do it. Just keep doing them, saying we may not be required to do it, but we're so confident in our processes, and we don't want to dilute minority voting strength, that if we make a change, we'll submit it to the Justice Department and ask them to give us a review. And I would encourage the Justice Department to stand up and say, it may not be required, but we'll voluntarily analyze anything that gets submitted. We'll give you an opinion about whether it respects minority voting rights. I think wise public officials would stand up and do that to show their citizens that they're not afraid of a review, and they want to make sure that all voting rights are protected.
Of course, we will see how this does play out in actuality, but Senator Tim Kaine, we thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll have some exit music for you at the end, too. We'll be right back.